The gold band caught the afternoon sunlight as Sarah McKenna held it up with trembling fingers, watching how it sparkled against the dusty window of Thornton's General Store in Abilene, Kansas. And she knew that parting with this last piece of her husband would break what remained of her heart. But her children's hollow eyes and empty bellies left her no choice. It was late August of 1874, and the summer heat had been merciless on the Kansas plains. Sarah stood at the counter, her worn calico dress hanging loose on her frame, evidence of too many meals skipped so her 2 children could eat. The storekeeper, Mr. Thornton, examined the ring with a jeweler's loupe, his weathered face expressionless as he calculated its worth against the desperation in her eyes. "It's good gold," he finally said, setting it down on the counter between them. "I can give you $8 for it. $8. Sarah's throat tightened. The ring had cost Thomas $20 when he'd saved up for months to buy it, back when the world was full of promise and their little farm was thriving. Back before the drought killed the crops, before the fever took Thomas, before she'd sold everything they owned just to keep her babies fed. "That's all." The words came out smaller than she intended. Thornton shrugged, not unkindly. "Gold prices are down, Mrs. McKenna, and it's not a heavy piece." $8 is fair. Fair. Nothing about this was fair. Nothing about burying a good man at 29 years old was fair. Nothing about watching your children grow thin and quiet was fair. But fairness was a luxury Sarah could no longer afford. "I'll take it," she whispered. Before Thornton could reach for his cash box, the door opened behind Sarah, bringing with it a gust of hot wind and the jingle of spurs. She didn't turn around, too focused on keeping her composure, on not breaking down in front of a stranger. "Afternoon, Mr. Thornton," a deep voice said, warm and unhurried in that way men who worked with horses often spoke. "I need to pick up that order of fence wire when you have a moment. Be right with you, Mr. Brennan, just finishing up here." Sarah watched Thornton's hand move toward the ring, her last connection to Thomas, to the life they'd built together. Her vision blurred with unshed tears. "That's a fine ring," the voice behind her said, closer now. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but I couldn't help but notice. You're selling it." Sarah finally turned to look at the man. He was tall, maybe 30 years old, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water in summer, green with flecks of brown. His dark hair needed a trim, curling slightly at his collar, and dust from the trail covered his clothes. But it was his expression that caught her off guard, something gentle and concerned in the way he looked at her. "I am," she managed, lifting her chin despite the shame burning in her chest. She wouldn't apologize for doing what she must to feed her children. The cowboy, Brennan, glanced at the ring, then back at her face. She watched something shift in his expression, a recognition of pain that spoke to his own familiarity with loss. "How much is Thornton paying you?" $8. Sarah didn't know why she was answering this stranger, but something about his directness invited honesty. Brennan nodded slowly, then reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather wallet, worn soft with age and use. "I'll give you 20 for it." Sarah's breath caught. $20. "That's more than fair for a gold band that fine," Brennan said, counting out bills onto the counter. "And I've been meaning to buy myself something nice. Good luck charm, maybe." Mr. Thornton frowned. "Now, Brennan, I was in the middle of a transaction here, and now you're not." Brennan's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath it. He pushed the money toward Sarah. "If the lady's willing to sell it to me instead." Sarah stared at the $20, more money than she'd seen in months. It would buy food, pay the rent on their tiny house for another month, maybe even get fabric for new clothes for Emma and little James. But something in this felt wrong, too much like charity. "Why?" she asked, meeting Brennan's eyes. "You don't know me. Why would you pay more than it's worth?" He was quiet for a moment, and she saw his jaw work as he chose his words carefully. "Let's just say I know what it's like to have nothing left but memories, ma'am, and memories are worth more than any amount of gold." The truth in his words hit her square in the chest. This wasn't pity in his eyes, it was understanding. Sarah looked down at the ring one more time, at the simple band that had encircled Thomas's finger for 3 years of marriage, then carefully picked up the $20. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "You can't know what this means." Brennan picked up the ring, holding it gently, almost reverently. "I hope things get better for you, ma'am." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak anymore, and hurried from the store before the tears could fall. She made it halfway down the wooden sidewalk before she had to stop, pressing her hand against the wall of the bank building, letting the emotion wash through her. $20. Her children would eat. They'd have a roof over their heads. But Thomas's ring was gone, and with it, the last physical piece of him she'd possessed. "Ma'am, Mrs. McKenna," she spun around, wiping quickly at her eyes. Brennan stood a few feet away, hat in his hands, the afternoon sun backlighting him in gold. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. "But I realized I bought this ring without thinking it through." He stepped closer, and Sarah could see the ring resting in his calloused palm. "Truth is, I don't have anyone to give a ring to, and it seems a shame for it to just sit in my pocket. I was thinking maybe you'd like to hold on to it for me, keep it safe until I do find someone." Sarah's heart stopped. "I don't understand." "I paid for it fair and square, so it's mine to do with as I please," Brennan continued, his green eyes kind. "And what would please me is knowing it's being looked after by someone who already loves it. You'd be doing me a favor, really. You're giving it back to me." It wasn't a question, but a statement of pure disbelief. "I'm asking you to keep it safe for me," he corrected gently. "There's a difference. This way you get to keep your husband's ring, and I get to know I helped someone who needed it. Seems like we both win." Sarah's throat closed completely, tears spilling over despite her best efforts to contain them. "I can't accept this. You already paid me $20. And I don't want it back." Brennan took her hand, carefully placing the ring in her palm and closing her fingers around it. His hand was warm, rough from work, and surprisingly gentle. "Please, let me do this one good thing." For a long moment they stood there on the sidewalk, the bustle of Abilene continuing around them. A wagon rattled past, someone shouted a greeting across the street, a dog barked in the distance. But Sarah could only focus on the feeling of the ring in her palm, solid and real, and the extraordinary kindness of this stranger who'd given her back more than just a piece of gold. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Brennan released her hand and stepped back, settling his hat back on his head. "Because someone should have done it for my mother when my father died. But nobody did, and I watched her sell every piece of him until there was nothing left but the hurt. I can't change what happened to her, but maybe I can change what happens to you." Sarah looked down at the ring, then back up at him. "I don't even know how to thank you." "No thanks needed, ma'am. Just take care of yourself and your little ones." He tipped his hat to her. "I should get back to Thornton for that fence wire. Good day to you, Mrs. McKenna." He turned to go, and Sarah found herself calling after him. "Wait, please, at least tell me your full name. I'd like to know who to pray for." He glanced back with a slight smile. "Cole Brennan, ma'am. I work at the Double R Ranch about 5 miles west of town." "I'm Sarah McKenna." "I know," he said softly. "Thornton used your name. It's nice to properly meet you, even under the circumstances." Then he was walking back toward the general store, and Sarah stood clutching the ring and $20, feeling as though the world had shifted slightly on its axis. She slipped the ring back onto the chain she wore around her neck, where it had lived since Thomas's death, and felt the weight of it settle against her heart. When Sarah returned to the small house she rented on the edge of town, Emma and James were waiting on the front step, their faces lighting up at the sight of her. Emma was 7, with Thomas's dark hair and serious brown eyes. James was only 4, still baby-round in the face despite the hard times with Sarah's lighter coloring. "Did you get food, Mama?" James asked, his voice hopeful. Sarah knelt down and pulled them both into her arms, breathing in the sweet smell of them. "Yes, baby. We're going to have a real supper tonight, and breakfast tomorrow, and for many days after." Emma pulled back to look at her mother's face, old beyond her years in her ability to read pain, You sold Papa's ring." "No," Sarah said, unable to stop the smile that spread across her face. "No, sweetheart, a miracle happened today. A good man bought the ring and gave it back to me. We have money for food and the ring too." "How?" Emma asked, suspicion and hope warring in her expression. "I don't fully understand it myself," Sarah admitted. "But there are still good people in this world, even when it feels like there aren't. Now come on, let's go to the store and buy what we need for supper." That evening, for the first time in weeks, Sarah's children went to bed with full stomachs. She'd bought flour, bacon, beans, some fresh vegetables from a farmer's wagon, and even a small bag of peppermints as a treat. As she cleaned up after their meal, working by lamplight in the tiny kitchen, she kept touching the ring through her dress, reassuring herself it was real. Cole Brennan. She turned the name over in her mind, this stranger who'd shown her such unexpected kindness. What kind of man did something like that? What kind of man saw a desperate woman in a store and decided to help without asking for anything in return? The kind of man the world needed more of, she thought. The kind of man Thomas had been. The next few days passed in a haze of relief and cautious optimism. Sarah found work taking in laundry, which didn't pay much but was something. She could stretch the $20 if she was careful, make it last until she could build up a bit more income. Emma helped with the washing, her small hands already learning the rhythm of work that all frontier children knew too young. James played in the yard, his laughter a sound Sarah had missed desperately during the hardest weeks. On the fourth day after meeting Cole Brennan, Sarah was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard a horse approach. She turned, shading her eyes against the morning sun, and felt her heart skip when she recognized the rider. Cole sat easy in the saddle, his horse a handsome chestnut gelding with a white star on its forehead. He raised a hand in greeting as he drew near, then dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent most of his life on horseback. "Mrs. McKenna," he said, removing his hat. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Mr. Brennan." Sarah was suddenly aware of how she must look, her hair coming loose from its bun, her hands red from the wash water. "No, you're not disturbing us. I was just doing some laundry." "I can see that." He glanced at the line of clothes flapping in the breeze. "You take in washing?" "I do now. Started a few days ago." She wiped her hands on her apron. "What brings you into town?" Cole shifted his weight, looking almost bashful. "Well, I was coming in for supplies anyway, and I thought I'd stop by." "Make sure you were doing all right. I hope that's not too forward." "It's kind," Sarah said. "Very kind. We're doing better than we have in weeks, thanks to you." Before Cole could respond, James came tearing around the corner of the house, chasing after a grasshopper and nearly ran straight into the tall cowboy. Cole caught him gently, steadying the boy with his hands. "Whoa there, little man, you all right?" James looked up at Cole with wide eyes, taking in the stranger who towered over him. "Who are you?" "James, mind your manners," Sarah said quickly. "This is Mr. Brennan, he's a friend." "I'm chasing a grasshopper," James announced, as if this explained everything. Cole crouched down to James's level, his expression serious. "Is that so? Must be a fast one if it's giving you this much trouble." "He's very fast, but I'm faster." "I bet you are." Cole glanced around the yard. "You know, grasshoppers like to hide in the tall grass over there. If you move real slow and quiet, you might catch him by surprise." James's face lit up, and he immediately adopted an exaggerated sneaking posture, creeping toward the patch of grass Cole had indicated. Sarah watched her son with a mixture of amusement and sadness. He'd been so quiet since Thomas died, so much of his natural exuberance dimmed by hunger and uncertainty. Seeing him play like a normal child again made her throat tight. "You're good with children," she observed as Cole stood back up. "I like kids. They're honest in a way most adults forget how to be." He watched James for a moment, then turned his attention back to Sarah. "I actually came by for a reason beyond just checking on you. The Double R is looking for someone to do cooking for the hands. Our regular cook's wife took ill and he's gone to care for her. The pay is decent and it includes meals for you and your children. I thought maybe you'd be interested." Sarah's breath caught. "Cooking for ranch hands. We've got about 15 men working the ranch right now. You'd need to prepare 3 meals a day, 6 days a week. Sundays are light, just a simple meal since most of the hands ride into town or rest. The work's hard, but the pay is $30 a month plus room and board if you need it. $30 a month, plus food." Sarah's mind reeled at the prospect. It was more than she could make taking in laundry, and the security of regular meals for her children was beyond price. "I don't know what to say," she managed. "Say you'll at least come see the place before you decide. I can take you out there today if you have time, you and your children both, so you can see where you'd be working." Emma had emerged from the house at the sound of voices and stood on the porch, watching the exchange with her characteristic wariness. Sarah glanced at her daughter, then back at Cole. "Why are you doing this? First the ring, now this?" Cole met her eyes steadily. "Because you need the work and we need a cook. And because I'd like to think that in a world full of people taking from each other, there's still room for people to help each other. Is that so hard to believe?" "Yes," Sarah said honestly. "In my experience, nobody gives something for nothing. I'm not asking for nothing. I'm asking you to cook meals for a bunch of hungry cowboys, which is hard work. You'd be earning every penny." He paused, then added more softly, "But I won't lie and say I'm not hoping this helps you, because I am. I've thought about you these past few days, wondered if you were managing, call it concern for a fellow human being." Sarah studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or hidden motives. But all she saw was sincerity and a genuine desire to help. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust this. "All right," she said. "We'll come see the ranch." Cole's face broke into a smile that transformed his features, making him look younger and less careworn. "That's wonderful. Let me help you finish hanging this laundry and then we can ride out." "You don't have to do that." "I know, but 4 hands work faster than 2. He was already moving toward the basket of wet clothes, picking up a shirt. "Just point me to where things go." Sarah directed him, bemused by the sight of this cowboy carefully hanging her laundry, making sure the clothespins were secure. Emma ventured down from the porch, curiosity overcoming her caution. "Mama says you gave her Papa's ring back," she said to Cole, her tone challenging. Cole looked at the little girl with the same seriousness he'd shown James. "I did. It seemed like something that should stay with your family." "Why?" "Because some things are more important than money. Your Papa's ring meant something to your mama, which means it's valuable in ways that can't be measured in dollars. Does that make sense?" Emma considered this, then nodded slowly. "I think so. Thank you for being kind to my mama." "You're welcome, Miss Emma. And thank you for sharing your mama with us for the day. I promise we'll have her back before supper." An hour later, Sarah found herself riding in Cole's wagon, with James on her lap and Emma pressed against her side. Cole had insisted on bringing the wagon instead of making them all ride horseback, understanding without being told that Sarah and her children weren't experienced riders. The journey to the Double R Ranch took them west out of Abilene, across rolling prairie land that had once been buffalo range, but was now being carved up into cattle ranches and farms. Cole kept up a steady stream of conversation during the ride, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the area. He had an easy way about him, never pushing but always engaging, drawing even Emma out of her shell with questions about what she liked to do and stories about animals he'd encountered over the years. "You ever seen a real live owl up close?" he asked at one point. Emma shook her head, her eyes wide. "We've got a big barn owl that lives in our stable. She's got babies right now, 3 of them. If your mama says it's all right, I can show them to you when we get there, but you have to be very quiet because Mama Owl is protective." "Can we, Mama?" Emma asked, and Sarah's heart squeezed at the excitement in her daughter's voice. "If Mr. Brennan says it's safe." "I'll be right there with you," Cole promised. "Won't let anything happen to you." The Double R Ranch came into view as they crested a low hill. It was a sprawling operation with a large main house, several barns and outbuildings, extensive corrals and miles of fence stretching in every direction. Cattle dotted the distant fields, and Sarah could see men working with horses in one of the corrals. "It's so big," Emma breathed. "The owner, Richard Rawlings, has been building this place up for 10 years now," Cole explained. "He's a good man, fair employer, treats his people right. That's his house there, the big one. The bunkhouse where the hands stay is over behind the main barn and the cookhouse is next to it." He drove the wagon directly to the cookhouse, a long, low building with a covered porch and several windows. Inside, Sarah found a large, well-equipped kitchen with a cast-iron stove, ample counter space, and shelves stocked with supplies. A long dining table stretched through the main room with benches on either side. "This would be your domain," Cole said, watching her take it all in. "Mr. Rawlings is particular about having good food for his men. He says a well-fed crew is a productive crew. You'd have a budget for supplies, and we get regular deliveries from town." Sarah ran her hand over the smooth wooden counter, imagining what it would be like to work in a kitchen this size, with these resources. At home, she cooked on a small stove with whatever ingredients she could scrape together. This was like a dream. "What happened to the previous cook?" she asked. "John, his wife has consumption. She's gone to live with her sister in Colorado, hoping the mountain air will help. John went with her." "We all hope she recovers, but it's serious." Cole's expression was somber. "He might not come back, even if she does get better. Said the memories here are too hard after losing their baby last winter." Sarah understood that sentiment all too well. Sometimes staying in a place where you'd been happy with someone you'd lost was more painful than starting over somewhere new. "When would you need me to start?" "We've been managing with the hands taking turns, but honestly, none of us can cook worth a damn. So as soon as you're willing would be appreciated." "There's a small house just over there," Cole continued, leading them back outside and pointing to a neat cottage about 100 yards from the cookhouse. "It's usually for the foreman, but our foreman lives with his family in town and rides out each day. You and your children could live there if you wanted. It has 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, and its own kitchen, though you'd likely be eating your meals at the cookhouse." Sarah stared at the little house with its whitewashed walls and green-shuttered windows. It was bigger than the place they were renting in town and in far better repair. "That would be included, with the job?" "Yes, ma'am, and like I said, meals for all 3 of you, Mr. Rawlings believes in taking care of his people." It was too good to be true. It had to be. Sarah waited for the catch, for the condition that would make this impossible, but Cole just stood there, patient and open, waiting for her answer. "I want to meet Mr. Rawlings first," she said finally. "If this is to be my employer, I should know him. Of course, he's up at the main house. Let's go introduce you." Richard Rawlings was a barrel-chested man in his 50s, with gray threading through his dark hair and a direct gaze that sized Sarah up in seconds. But his handshake was firm and respectful, and he invited them all into his home without hesitation. "Cole tells me you might be interested in the cook position," he said, gesturing for Sarah to sit. Emma and James stayed close to their mother, eyeing the wealthy rancher with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "I am, sir, if you're willing to hire me. I don't have experience cooking for such a large group, but I'm a hard worker and a fast learner." "Can you make biscuits?" "Yes, sir." "Good beef stew?" "I can." "And you won't run off screaming when 15 hungry cowboys track mud through your clean kitchen?" Sarah almost smiled. "I have 2 children, Mr. Rawlings. It takes more than mud to scare me." Rawlings let out a bark of laughter. "I like her, Cole. She'll do fine." He turned his attention back to Sarah. "The job is yours if you want it. Cole probably told you the pay and conditions. You start when you're ready, and if it doesn't work out for either of us, we'll figure something else out. Fair enough?" "More than fair, thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've tried to get those boys to wipe their feet." But his eyes were kind, and Sarah felt the knot of worry in her chest loosen slightly. They sealed the agreement with another handshake, and then Cole took them to see the barn owl as promised. Emma was enchanted by the fluffy baby owls, and even serious little Emma giggled when one of them bobbed its head at her. James wanted to touch them, but Cole patiently explained why they needed to look with their eyes and not their hands. On the ride back to town, Sarah was quiet, processing everything that had happened. In the span of less than a week, her life had changed completely. She had money, she had a job, she had a home waiting for her children. It felt like a dream, fragile and likely to disappear if she examined it too closely. "You're awful quiet," Cole observed, having second thoughts. "No, just trying to understand why all this is happening, why you're being so kind." Cole was silent for a long moment, his hands loose on the reins as the horse plodded steadily homeward. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and thoughtful. "When I was 10 years old, my father died in a stampede, left my mother with 3 children and a failing farm in Texas. She tried to keep it going, but drought and debt ate us alive. We lost everything. She had to sell her wedding ring to buy food, just like you were going to do. Then she sold his watch, his saddle, his rifle. Every piece of him that she had, she sold to keep us alive." He paused, his jaw tight. "By the time I was old enough to work and help support us, there was nothing left of my father except our memories. No ring, no pictures, nothing. It broke something in my mother. She survived, but the joy went out of her." Sarah felt tears pricking her eyes. "I'm so sorry." "She passed 5 years ago, died hard, died sad. And ever since, I've wondered what would have happened if someone had helped us when we needed it most. If someone had given her back just one thing, let her keep just one piece of him." He glanced over at Sarah. "I can't go back and help my mother. But when I saw you in that store, trying to hold yourself together while selling the one thing you had left of your husband, I thought maybe I could do for you what nobody did for her. Maybe that would mean something." "It means everything," Sarah whispered. "You gave me hope when I had none. You gave my children security. You gave me back my husband's ring. That's not a small thing, Cole, that's a miracle." He smiled, but there was sadness in it. "If it helps you even a little bit, then it was worth it." They rode in companionable silence after that, and Sarah found herself studying Cole's profile when she thought he wasn't looking. He was younger than she'd first thought, probably not more than 30. Handsome in a weathered, honest way, with sun lines around his eyes and strong hands that handled the reins with unconscious competence. But more than his appearance, it was his character that struck her. His kindness, his empathy, his willingness to act on behalf of others. Thomas would have liked him, she thought, and was surprised by how much comfort that thought brought her. The next week passed in a flurry of activity. Sarah gave notice on her rented house, packed their meager belongings, and prepared to move to the Double R. Several women from the church she occasionally attended helped her, bringing food and good wishes. Mrs. Patterson, an older widow who'd befriended Sarah after Thomas's death, was particularly pleased. "A steady job and a good home for those babies," she said, folding Sarah's spare dress with care. "That's answered prayer right there, and this Mr. Brennan who arranged it all sounds like a fine man." "He is," Sarah agreed, wrapping her few dishes in newspaper. "Very kind. And unmarried, I hear." Sarah shot Mrs. Patterson a look. "I'm not interested in remarrying. I barely finished burying Thomas." "Thomas has been gone 8 months, dear. No one would fault you for eventually finding companionship again. You're young, you have children who need a father, and from what you've told me, this Cole Brennan is a good Christian man with steady work." "Mrs. Patterson, please, I'm just grateful for the job, that's all." But as Sarah continued packing, she couldn't help but think about Cole. Not in a romantic way, she told herself firmly. She'd loved Thomas with everything she had, and that kind of love didn't just transfer to someone else. But she did find herself appreciating Cole's presence, the way he made her feel safe, the way he was patient with her children. It was nice to have someone she could rely on, even if only as a friend and employer. Moving day came with typical Kansas weather unpredictability. The morning started clear, but by afternoon, dark clouds were building on the western horizon. Cole arrived with the ranch wagon and another cowhand, a grizzled older man named Pete who greeted Sarah with a respectful nod and immediately started loading her belongings with efficient care. "Storm's coming," Pete observed, eyeing the sky. "We should get moving if we want to beat it." They made good time, but the storm moved faster. They were still a mile from the ranch when the first fat raindrops began to fall, quickly intensifying into a downpour. Cole pushed the horses harder and they pulled up in front of the little cottage just as lightning split the sky. "Get the kids inside," Cole shouted over the wind. "Pete and I will unload." Sarah rushed Emma and James through the door into the unfamiliar house. It smelled of fresh paint and lemon oil, and she realized someone had cleaned it thoroughly for their arrival. A fire was already laid in the fireplace, ready to light, and lamps were placed conveniently on tables. While the storm raged outside, Cole and Pete worked to bring in the furniture and boxes, getting soaked to the skin in the process. Sarah tried to help, but Cole waved her off. "You get the kids settled. We've got this." By the time they finished, both men were dripping water on the floor and thunder was shaking the windows. Sarah felt terrible watching them prepare to head back out into the weather. "At least wait until the worst passes," she urged. "You can't ride in this." "We've ridden in worse," Pete said, but his heart wasn't in the argument. Another crack of thunder made him wince. Then again, maybe waiting a bit wouldn't hurt. Sarah put coffee on to boil and found towels for both men. While they dried off, she explored her new home properly. The bedroom that would be hers was larger than her entire previous house. The children would share the other bedroom, which had 2 small beds already in it. The sitting room had a worn but comfortable sofa, 2 chairs, and several bookcases. The small kitchen was well stocked with basics. "Mr. Rawlings had us fix it up," Cole said when he noticed her looking around with wonder. "Wanted to make sure it was ready for a family." "It's more than I dreamed," Sarah said honestly. "I can't believe this is ours." "You'll earn it," Pete said gruffly. "Feeding those boys is no small task. They eat like locusts." The storm settled into a steady rain, and after an hour, Pete declared it safe enough to ride back to the bunkhouse. Cole lingered a moment longer at the door, his hat in his hands. "You need anything tonight, you come to the bunkhouse. It's the long building past the barn. Someone will be awake. We take turns keeping watch during storms, make sure nothing spooks the animals." "We'll be fine," Sarah assured him. "You've done so much already, more than I can ever repay." "It's not about repayment," Cole said quietly. "It's about doing what's right. Sleep well, Sarah. Tomorrow you start your new job." He'd used her first name, she realized after he left. Somewhere in the past week, they'd transitioned from formal strangers to something more familiar. She wasn't sure how she felt about that, but she didn't dislike it. That night, Sarah lay in her new bed, listening to the rain on the roof and her children's peaceful breathing from the next room. For the first time since Thomas died, she felt something like peace. Not happiness, not yet, but the possibility of it. A sense that maybe, just maybe, she could build a life here, that her children could be safe and fed and happy. And when she touched the ring on its chain around her neck, she sent up a prayer of gratitude. For Thomas, who'd loved her. For her children, who gave her reason to keep going. And for Cole Brennan, the stranger who'd become an unexpected blessing. Sarah's first day as cook for the Double R Ranch started before dawn. She woke in the pre-dawn darkness, disoriented for a moment in the unfamiliar bed, then remembered where she was and why. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the world fresh and clean. She dressed quickly in the dim light, pinned up her hair, and made her way to the cookhouse while her children still slept. Cole was already there, building up the fire in the big stove. "Morning," he said with a smile. "Thought I'd get this going for you. Takes a while to heat up properly." "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I wanted your first morning to start easy." He gestured to the shelves and pantry. "Everything's labeled and organized. The hands expect breakfast at 6, dinner at noon, and supper at 6 in the evening. Coffee should always be available. They'll come in shifts usually, especially during busy seasons, but right now most of them eat together." Sarah took a deep breath, surveying the kitchen that would be her domain. What do they usually eat for breakfast? Biscuits, bacon or sausage, eggs if we have them, gravy, fried potatoes, sometimes pancakes. They're working men, so they need food that sticks to their ribs. I can do that. Cole lingered, watching her tie on an apron and begin pulling ingredients from the pantry with increasing confidence. You're going to be fine, Sarah, better than fine, I can tell. His confidence in her was touching and steadying. Sarah found herself smiling at him. Thank you for everything. For being here this morning. Nowhere else I'd rather be, he said, and something in his tone made her look up sharply, but he was already moving toward the door. I'll send someone to check on your kids, make sure they're still sleeping all right. You focus on this. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah mixed biscuit dough, fried bacon and sausage, scrambled 24 eggs, made sawmill gravy, and brewed enough coffee to float a boat. Her hands remembered the rhythms of cooking even though the scale was larger than she was used to. She just pulled the last pan of golden biscuits from the oven when the door opened and cowboys began filing in. They were a varied bunch, ranging from boys barely older than 18 to grizzled men in their 50s. But they all had the same wind-burned faces, the same lean, muscular builds from hard outdoor work, and the same appreciative expressions when they smelled the food. Lord have mercy, that smells good, one young cowboy declared. Ma'am, I'm Danny, and I think I might be in love with you already. That's just your stomach talking, Danny, Pete said, cuffing the boy lightly on the back of the head. Show some respect. This is Mrs. McKenna. She's a widow and a lady, so you watch your tongue. Sorry, ma'am, Danny said sheepishly. Didn't mean no disrespect. Sarah surprised herself by laughing. No offense taken. Now sit down and eat before it gets cold. The men descended on the food like starving wolves, but to Sarah's relief, they also showed surprising courtesy. They passed dishes to each other, said please and thank you, and several of them complimented the cooking. Cole sat at the far end of the table, not saying much but watching Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. After breakfast, the men cleared out quickly, needing to get to their various jobs around the ranch. Several of them took their plates to the washing tub without being asked, which Sarah appreciated. Cole was the last to leave, pausing at the door. That was the best breakfast we've had in months. You're going to spoil these boys. They're not so bad, Sarah said, already starting on the mountain of dishes. Rough around the edges, but respectful enough. They know what's what. Pete had a talk with them yesterday, made sure they understood you were to be treated like anyone's mother with courtesy and respect. Cole grabbed a towel. Let me help with these. You have work to do. I'm the horse trainer. My work starts when I say it does. He began drying the plates she washed, working in comfortable silence beside her. It felt domestic and strange and somehow right, working side by side with this man she barely knew but who'd already changed her life so profoundly. Sarah found herself acutely aware of his presence, the way he moved, the low humming sound he made while he worked, the clean smell of soap and leather that clung to him. Can I ask you something? She said after a while. Anything? Do you really think I can do this? Cook for all these men day after day? Cole set down the plate he was drying and turned to face her fully. Sarah, you survived losing your husband, nearly starving, and having to sell the one thing that meant the most to you, all while keeping your children safe and cared for. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. Cooking for some cowboys is nothing compared to what you've already done. His words hit her straight in the heart, and to her horror, Sarah felt tears welling up. She tried to turn away, but Cole gently caught her arm. Hey, it's all right. You're allowed to feel overwhelmed. I'm not overwhelmed, I'm grateful, and I'm terrified of disappointing you after everything you've done. You couldn't disappoint me if you tried, Cole said softly. You're here, you're working hard, you're taking care of your kids, that's all anyone can ask. Sarah looked up at him, at the sincerity in his green eyes, and felt something shift inside her. Not love, she wasn't ready for that, might never be ready for that again. But recognition, maybe. An acknowledgement that this man was special, that his kindness wasn't common, that she was lucky to have crossed his path. "Thank you," she whispered. Cole's hand was still on her arm, warm and steady, and for a moment they just stood there, something unspoken passing between them. Then Emma's voice called from outside, breaking the spell. "Mama, where are you?" Cole stepped back, clearing his throat. "That's your cue. I should get to work anyway. See you at dinner." He left quickly, and Sarah went to tend to her children, her thoughts a confused jumble of emotions she wasn't ready to examine too closely. The days fell into a rhythm. Sarah woke before dawn, cooked 3 meals a day, cleaned the cookhouse, and managed her small household. Emma helped with age-appropriate tasks, learning to set tables and wash vegetables. James played in the yard under the watchful eyes of whatever cowboy happened to be nearby, all of them taking turns entertaining the little boy. Cole was a constant presence, always finding reasons to stop by the cookhouse. He'd help with heavy lifting, bring Sarah fresh vegetables from the ranch garden, or simply sit and drink coffee while she cooked, telling her stories about the horses he was training. Sarah found herself looking forward to these visits more than she wanted to admit. 3 weeks into her employment, Sarah was rolling out pie dough when Mr. Rawlings came into the cookhouse. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron, but he waved her back to work. "Don't let me interrupt." "I just wanted to see how you're settling in." "Very well, sir. Everyone has been kind and the work is manageable." "More than manageable. The men tell me you're the best cook this ranch has ever had. Pete said your beef stew alone is worth the wage I'm paying you." Rawlings helped himself to a cup of coffee. "I also wanted to mention that we're having a barn dance in 2 weeks. It's become a tradition, celebrating the end of summer before the fall work really hits. You and your children are welcome to attend as my guests." A barn dance. Sarah's immediate instinct was to decline. She was still in mourning, still wearing black most days. Dancing seemed disrespectful to Thomas's memory. But then she thought about Emma, who'd had so little joy in her young life lately. About James, who deserved to see his mother smile. About herself and the tight, closed feeling that had lived in her chest since Thomas died. "Thank you, Mr. Rawlings. We'd be honored to come." "Excellent. Fair warning, most of the single men in 3 counties show up to these things, so prepare for a lot of attention." A pretty widow with a steady job and her own home is quite the catch around here. Sarah felt her face heat. "I'm not looking for a husband, sir." "Maybe not, but that won't stop them from looking for a wife." Rawlings smiled kindly. "Just be prepared, that's all I'm saying. And know that Cole and the ranch hands will watch out for you. You're one of ours now." After he left, Sarah stood at her work table, thoughts whirling. A barn dance meant music and community and normalcy. It meant people looking at her as something other than poor widow McKenna. It meant, possibly, men expressing interest in courting her. She wasn't ready for that. Wasn't sure she'd ever be ready. But maybe going to the dance wasn't about finding a new husband. Maybe it was just about remembering how to live again. That evening, after the supper dishes were washed and her children were in bed, Sarah sat on the porch of her cottage and watched the sun set over the prairie. The air was cooling, carrying hints of the autumn to come. In the distance, she could hear cattle lowing and the occasional shout of a cowboy settling the animals for the night. Footsteps approached, and she knew without looking that it was Cole. He'd taken to walking over most evenings after the work was done, sitting with her for a while in comfortable silence or easy conversation. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Please do." Cole settled onto the porch step beside her chair, stretching out his long legs. He'd cleaned up from the day's work, his hair still damp, wearing a clean shirt. "Mr. Rawlings mentioned the barn dance," Sarah said after a moment. "You going?" "I told him yes, for the children." Cole nodded. "They'll love it. Lots of music and food and games for the kids. Emma can play with some of the other girls from neighboring ranches, and James will probably fall asleep on a hay bale halfway through." Mr. Rawlings said a lot of single men come to these dances. "He's not wrong." Cole's voice was carefully neutral. "It's one of the few social events around here. People look forward to it. Sarah gathered her courage. Will you be dancing with anyone? Cole turned to look at her, and even in the fading light she could see the intensity in his eyes. Depends, will you save me a dance? Her heart skipped. Cole, I don't know if that's appropriate. I'm still in mourning. I'm not asking you to stop mourning your husband, Sarah. I'm just asking for one dance as friends. Is that all right? Friends? Yes, they were friends. That's all this was. Sarah nodded. One dance as friends? Then that's the only dancing I care about. Cole stood, brushing off his pants. I should let you get some rest. Big day of cooking tomorrow. Cole, wait. Sarah stood too, suddenly needing him to understand something. These past few weeks, having you around, your friendship, it's meant a lot to me, more than I know how to say. It's meant a lot to me too, Cole said quietly. More than you probably realize. Sleep well, Sarah. He walked off into the darkness, and Sarah stood on her porch, hand pressed to the ring beneath her dress, wondering when exactly her feelings for Cole, Brennan, had started shifting from gratitude into something else entirely. The 2 weeks until the barn dance passed quickly, filled with the constant demands of cooking and childcare. But Sarah noticed changes in herself. She started humming while she worked. She found herself taking more care with her appearance, pinning her hair in prettier styles, wearing her better dress even on ordinary days. She laughed more, especially when Cole was around. The other ranch hands noticed too. Pete cornered her one morning after breakfast, his weathered face serious. That's a good man, you know, Cole Brennan, best man I've ever worked with. I know he is, Sarah said, not sure where this was going. He's been alone a long time, keeps to himself mostly, never took up with any of the girls in town even though plenty have tried. But I've seen how he looks at you and I've seen how you look at him. Just wanted you to know he's the real thing. If you're of a mind to let someone pass those walls you've built, you couldn't do better. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. I loved my husband, Pete. I know you did. And Cole knows it too. He's not asking you to stop, but loving someone who's gone doesn't mean you can't ever love someone who's here. Just something to think about. The day of the barn dance dawned clear and perfect. Sarah spent the afternoon helping prepare food while other ranch wives and daughters transformed the barn into something magical. Lanterns were hung from the rafters, bales of hay arranged for seating, and a small stage erected for the musicians. Sarah had only one good dress that wasn't black, a dark blue calico that Thomas had liked. She'd kept it packed away, unable to bear wearing it after he died. But tonight she pulled it out, pressed it carefully, and put it on. The fit was loose now after months of too little food, but Emma helped her take it in with strategic pins, and Sarah had to admit she looked almost pretty when she checked her reflection. You look beautiful, Mama, Emma said seriously. Like you used to. Sarah hugged her daughter tight. Thank you, sweetheart. Now let's get you and James ready. When they arrived at the barn as the sun was setting, the party was already in full swing. Musicians were playing fiddles and a banjo, people were dancing, and long tables groaned with food that Sarah and the other women had spent days preparing. Children ran between the adults, shrieking with laughter, while older folks sat on the hay bales and watched with indulgent smiles. Emma's eyes went wide. Mama, it's wonderful. It is, Sarah agreed, feeling some of her daughter's wonder. She'd forgotten what it was like to be part of a community like this, to feel the warmth of people gathered together in celebration. Mrs. McKenna, Mr. Rawlings appeared with a broad smile. You made it, and don't you look lovely? Come, let me introduce you around properly. The next hour was a blur of names and faces. Neighboring ranchers and their families, shopkeepers from town, the blacksmith, the doctor, the schoolteacher. Everyone was friendly, welcoming Sarah as the new cook at the Double R. Several single men made their interest known, asking if they could call on her if she'd save them a dance. Sarah was polite but non-committal, feeling overwhelmed by the attention. She'd been invisible for so long, just another struggling widow, that being noticed felt strange and uncomfortable. She was catching her breath near the refreshment table when Cole appeared at her elbow. He dressed up for the occasion, wearing a dark vest over a white shirt, his hair neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaved. He looked handsome enough to make Sarah's breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "That color suits you." "Thank you, you clean up pretty well yourself." High praise from a lady. He held out his hand. "I believe you promised me a dance." Sarah hesitated, suddenly nervous. "I haven't danced since Thomas died." "Then it's time," Cole said gently. "It's all right to live again, Sarah. Thomas would want you to be happy." She knew he was right. Thomas had loved life, loved music, loved dancing. He'd never want her to lock herself away in grief forever. Slowly, Sarah placed her hand in Cole's. He led her to the dance floor just as the musicians struck up a waltz. Cole's hand settled at her waist, warm and steady, his other hand holding hers carefully. They began to move, and Sarah was surprised to find that her body remembered how to do this, how to follow a partner's lead, how to let the music carry her. "You're a good dancer," she said after a moment. "My mother insisted all her boys learn, said it was a mark of civilization even on the frontier." Cole smiled at the memory. "My brothers hated it, but I didn't mind." They turned together, and Sarah was acutely aware of how close they were, of Cole's hand at her waist, of the way he was looking at her. Not with pity or charity, but with something that made her pulse quicken. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," Cole said as the dance continued. "These past few weeks, getting to know you, spending time with you and your children, it's been the best part of my days. You've become important to me, more important than I probably should admit." Sarah's heart hammered. "Cole, I know it's too soon. I know you're still mourning Thomas, and I respect that. But I needed you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to court you properly. Not because I pity you or want to rescue you, but because I genuinely care about you, because I think you're remarkable. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm home." The music swelled around them, and Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I don't know if I can love again. I don't know if I have it in me. I'm not asking you to love me right now. I'm just asking you to be open to the possibility someday." "That's all." Cole's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "I'm a patient man, Sarah. I can wait." The dance ended, and they stood there in the middle of the floor while other couples swirled around them. Sarah looked up at this good, kind man who'd given her so much and was asking for so little in return. She thought about Thomas, about the love they'd shared, and wondered if he would approve of Cole. She thought he would. She thought Thomas would be glad to know that someone good and decent wanted to care for his widow and children. "Ask me again in a few months," she finally said. "When I've had more time, when I'm more sure of what I'm feeling." Cole's face broke into a smile that lit up his whole being. "I can do that. Thank you for the dance, Sarah, and for being honest with me." He escorted her back to the side of the barn, then disappeared into the crowd. Sarah stood there, hand pressed to her racing heart, feeling more alive than she had in months. Terrified, yes. Confused, absolutely. But also hopeful, and that was something she'd thought lost to her forever. The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant haze. Emma made friends with some girls her age and played games in the hayloft under adult supervision. James fell asleep exactly as Cole had predicted, curled up on a hay bale with several other exhausted children. Sarah danced a few more times with different partners, including Mr. Rawlings and Pete, but her eyes kept finding Cole across the barn. He danced with several other women, she noticed, always polite and friendly but never lingering the way he had with her. Every so often, their eyes would meet across the crowd, and something electric would pass between them. Sarah was helping clean up late in the evening when Martha Wilson, the wife of a neighboring rancher, sidled up beside her. "That Cole Brennan is smitten with you," she said with a knowing smile. "And unless I'm much mistaken, you're not unaffected yourself. Is it that obvious?" "Only to anyone with eyes, dear." Martha began stacking plates. "He's a good man, lost his whole family young, worked his way up from nothing. Mr. Wilson thinks very highly of him. Says Cole has a gift with horses that's near magical. He's been very kind to me and my children. I suspect he'd like to be more than kind given the chance." Martha paused in her work. I knew your husband a little. He bought a horse from my husband once. He was a good man, too, but good men can die and the living have to keep living. There's no shame in finding happiness again, even if it feels too soon. Sarah nodded, grateful for the older woman's wisdom. Thank you, I needed to hear that. When the evening finally ended, Cole drove Sarah and her sleeping children back to their cottage in his wagon. The night was full of stars and the prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, silver in the moonlight. Did you have a good time? Cole asked. I did, better than I expected. Sarah glanced at him. Thank you for being patient with me, for understanding that I need time. Take all the time you need. I meant what I said, I'm not going anywhere. At the cottage, Cole carried James inside and laid him gently on his bed while Sarah helped Emma, who was drowsy but awake. After both children were settled, Sarah walked Cole back to the door. Good night, Cole. He stood on the threshold, backlit by starlight, and Sarah was struck again by how handsome he was, how solid and real. On impulse, she reached up and kissed his cheek, brief and chaste but meaningful. Thank you for tonight, for everything. Cole's hand came up to touch where her lips had been, his expression wonder-struck. Good night, Sarah, sweet dreams. Autumn arrived on the plains with crisp mornings and brilliant sunsets. The work at the ranch intensified as cattle were moved to winter pastures and preparations were made for the cold months ahead. Sarah's days were full, but she'd never been happier. Her children were thriving. Emma had started attending the small school in town 3 days a week, and James was losing his baby roundness, growing tall and sturdy. And there was Cole. Always Cole, weaving himself into the fabric of her days. He taught James to ride on a gentle old mare. He helped Emma with her numbers when she struggled with homework. He fixed the shutter on Sarah's cottage that had come loose in a windstorm. He brought her wildflowers for no reason other than they'd made him think of her. They didn't speak again about courtship or the future. They existed in a comfortable present, growing closer day by day, learning each other's rhythms and habits. Sarah found herself confiding in Cole about things she'd never told anyone, about her fears and hopes, and the complicated grief she still carried for Thomas. Cole, in turn, opened up about his past. He told her about growing up poor in Texas, about working his first cattle drive at 14 to help support his family. About his mother's death and how lost he'd felt afterward, drifting from ranch to ranch until he landed at the Double R and finally found a place that felt like home. Until you came along, he said one October evening as they sat on Sarah's porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. Now home feels like wherever you are. Sarah reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. I think I'm ready. Ready for what? Ready to say yes. If you still want to court me, Cole Brennan, I'd be honored. Cole turned to her, his green eyes bright with emotion. You mean it? I mean it. These past months, you've shown me that it's possible to honor the past while still embracing the future. Thomas will always be part of me, but that doesn't mean I can't make room for someone else. For you. Cole lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I promise I'll do right by you, Sarah, by you and Emma and James. I'll be patient, I'll be kind, and I'll never ask you to be anything but yourself. I know, Sarah said softly. That's why I'm saying yes. Their courtship, once officially begun, was the talk of the Double R and the surrounding ranches. Everyone seemed pleased by the match, from Mr. Rawlings, who gave his blessing, to Pete, who claimed he'd predicted it from the start, to the other cowboys who treated Cole to endless ribbing about being domesticated. Cole took his courting seriously, calling on Sarah properly on Sunday afternoons, bringing small gifts for the children, asking permission before even holding her hand. It was sweet and old-fashioned and exactly what Sarah needed. She'd rushed into marriage with Thomas when they were both young and impulsive. This time, she wanted to build something slowly and carefully, on a foundation of genuine friendship and respect. Winter came, bringing snow and bitter cold. The ranch work slowed and the cowboys spent more time in the bunkhouse, doing repairs on equipment and tack. Sarah's cookhouse became a warm refuge, always smelling of fresh bread and coffee, always welcoming to men coming in from the cold. On Christmas Eve, Mr. Rawlings threw a party at the main house for all the ranch families and hands. There was a massive tree decorated with paper chains and candles, presents for all the children, and more food than Sarah had seen in one place since before Thomas died. Cole gave Emma a beautiful doll with a porcelain face and James a carved wooden horse. For Sarah, he'd made something himself, a small wooden box with her initials carved on the lid. Inside, nestled on velvet, was a silver locket. "Open it," he said softly as they stood slightly apart from the crowd. Sarah did and found 2 spaces for photographs. One side was empty, waiting. The other held a tiny photograph of Thomas that Cole must have gotten from her belongings. "I thought you could keep him close to your heart," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. "And maybe, someday, if you wanted, you could put another picture in the other side, but only if and when you're ready." Sarah looked at the locket, at the thoughtful way Cole had made space for her past while offering her a future, and felt love bloom in her chest. Not the wild, passionate love she'd had with Thomas, but something deeper and more mature. A love built on understanding and patience and genuine care. "Cole, I love you," she said, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. "I think I've been falling in love with you for months, but I was too afraid to admit it, but I'm not afraid anymore." Cole's face transformed with joy. "Sarah, I've loved you since the day I saw you in that store, trying to be brave while your world fell apart. I've loved you every day since. I'll love you for the rest of my life if you'll let me." They kissed then, gentle and sweet, while Christmas music played in the background and snow fell softly outside the windows. Emma and James ran up to show them some treasure they'd discovered, and Cole scooped them both up, making them giggle. Sarah stood watching her small family, her heart so full it ached. Spring arrived with mud and new calves and endless rain that turned the prairie green and lush. On a Sunday afternoon in April, exactly 1 year after Sarah had tried to sell her wedding ring, Cole asked her to marry him. They were riding together, just the 2 of them, while Emma and James stayed with Mrs. Patterson in town. Cole had packed a picnic, and they'd ridden out to a spot overlooking a creek where cottonwood trees provided shade, and the sound of running water was peaceful. "Sarah McKenna," Cole said, kneeling in the new grass. "You've made this past year the best of my life. You've given me a family, a purpose, a reason to be grateful every morning I wake up. I know I'm not Thomas, and I'd never try to replace him. But I love you with everything I am, and I love those children like they're my own. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The ring he offered was delicate and beautiful, with a small diamond that caught the sunlight. Sarah looked at it, then at Cole's hopeful, earnest face and felt nothing but certainty. "Yes, yes, Cole, I'll marry you." They were married in June in the small church in Abilene, with Emma as flower girl and James as ring bearer. Sarah wore a new dress of cream-colored silk that Martha Wilson had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers from the prairie. But around her neck, on its silver chain, she wore both her wedding rings, Thomas's simple gold band and Cole's new ring with its diamond. One for the past she'd loved, one for the future she was building. The wedding was simple but joyful, attended by half the county. Mr. Rawlings gave Sarah away, and Pete stood up as Cole's best man. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed Sarah tenderly, then bent down to hug Emma and James, making them officially a family. The reception was held at the Double R with dancing and food and celebration that lasted well into the night. Sarah danced with her new husband under the stars, feeling blessed beyond measure. "Happy?" Cole asked as they swayed together. "Happier than I ever thought I'd be again," Sarah admitted. "You gave me my life back, Cole. More than my life, you gave me hope." "You gave me a reason to be the man I wanted to be," Cole replied. "You and those kids, you're my everything." They moved into the cottage together, Cole bringing his few possessions from the bunkhouse. It was strange at first, sharing space with a man again, but Cole was patient and thoughtful, giving Sarah room to adjust. He was wonderful with Emma and James, firm but kind, teaching them about the ranch and the animals, reading to them at night, tucking them in with the same care Sarah did. Life settled into a new rhythm, fuller and richer than before. Sarah continued cooking at the ranch, though Cole helped more now, and Emma was getting old enough to assist seriously. They talked about the future, about maybe having children together, about building a larger house someday when they could afford it. On the 1-year anniversary of their wedding, Cole surprised Sarah with a photograph. He'd ridden into town and had it taken at the photographer's studio, a formal portrait of himself in his best clothes. That evening, as they sat together after the children were in bed, he handed it to her along with the silver locket he'd given her at Christmas. "For the empty side," he said. "If you want." Sarah opened the locket, looking at Thomas's photograph on one side, her first love, the father of her children, forever young in the image. Then she looked at Cole's photograph, at the man who'd saved her when she had nothing, who'd loved her patiently and well, who'd given her a future when she thought she had none. Carefully, she placed Cole's photograph in the empty space, then closed the locket. Past and present, loss and love, all contained in one piece of silver worn close to her heart. "Perfect," she whispered. 2 years into their marriage, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with complicated emotions, joy mixed with fear. Emma and James were Thomas's children, links to a man she'd never stop loving. This child would be Cole's, a new beginning. She worried about keeping the memories alive, about balancing past and present. Cole sensed her uncertainty and addressed it head-on one evening as they prepared for bed. "Sarah, this baby doesn't erase Emma and James. It doesn't erase Thomas. It's not about replacement, it's about addition. Our family is just getting bigger, that's all. And those kids will always know about their father, how much he loved them, how good he was. I promise you that. You do that. Keep his memory alive even though it might be uncomfortable." "It's not uncomfortable. Thomas gave me the 2 best children I could ask for, and he loved you when you needed it most. I owe him a debt I can never repay. The least I can do is make sure his children know what kind of man their father was." Sarah fell asleep that night in her husband's arms, grateful beyond words for his generosity of spirit. Their son was born in February of 1877, during a brutal cold snap that had everyone huddled near fires. The labor was long and difficult, with the doctors snowbound in town and only Martha Wilson and Cole present to help. Cole held Sarah's hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement, never leaving her side. When the baby finally came, squalling and red-faced and healthy, Cole cut the cord with shaking hands, then placed the tiny bundle in Sarah's arms. "He's perfect," Sarah breathed, examining every finger and toe. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Cole asked, stroking the baby's downy head. Sarah had thought about this through the long months of pregnancy. "I'd like to name him Thomas Cole Brennan. Thomas for my first husband, Cole for you, both the good men in my life." Cole's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, you don't have to do that." "I want to, it feels right." She looked up at her husband. "Is that all right with you?" "It's more than all right, it's perfect." Cole kissed her forehead, then the baby's. "Welcome to the family, Thomas Cole. You've got big shoes to fill with a name like that, but I think you'll manage." Emma and James were entranced by their baby brother, wanting to help with everything. They took their roles as older siblings seriously, James especially feeling important and grown up at 7 years old. Cole made sure to spend special time with each of them, never letting them feel displaced by the new baby. Life at the Double R continued to be good. Mr. Rawlings made Cole foreman after the previous one retired, which came with a raise in pay and more responsibility. They were able to save money, planning for the day when they might buy their own land and start their own ranch. 3 years after Thomas Cole's birth, Sarah gave Cole a daughter they named Grace Martha, after Cole's mother and Martha Wilson, who'd become like a mother to Sarah. 2 years after that came another son, William James, called Billy to avoid confusion with big brother James. Their cottage grew too small, and with Mr. Rawlings's blessing and help, they built a proper house on Double R land, a sturdy two-story structure with enough bedrooms for their growing family and a wide porch where they could sit and watch the sunset. Emma grew into a lovely young woman, smart and capable, who eventually married a young rancher from a neighboring spread. James followed in Cole's footsteps, becoming a skilled horseman and eventually foreman of his own ranch in Colorado. The 3 children Sarah had with Cole grew up knowing both the story of their mother's first husband, the brave man who'd been taken too soon, and the love of the father who'd chosen to raise them as his own. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole took Sarah back to the spot where he'd proposed, by the creek with the cottonwood trees. They were older now, marked by years of hard work and child-rearing, but their love had only deepened. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked as they sat together in the shade. "Taking on a widow with 2 children, all the complications that came with me," Cole pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Not for 1 second. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah Brennan. You and all our children, biological or not, we built something good here, something lasting." "We did," Sarah agreed, touching the locket at her throat. She still wore it every day, both photographs tucked inside, both loves preserved. "I used to think I'd used up all my chances at happiness when Thomas died. I thought that was it, the one great love of my life, and I'd spend the rest of my days just surviving. And now I know that the heart is more expansive than I gave it credit for. There's room for all of it, the grief and the joy, the past and the present, the love I had and the love I have. Thomas gave me 3 years of happiness and 2 beautiful children. You've given me 20 years of partnership and 3 more beautiful children, and a life I never dreamed possible when I was standing in that store, trying to sell my wedding ring just to feed my babies." Cole was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, I've never told you this, but I almost didn't stop you that day. I walked into Thornton's store, saw you at the counter, and my first instinct was to mind my own business. I'm so glad I didn't listen to that instinct." "Why did you speak up?" "Because I saw my mother in you. The same desperation, the same dignity despite the circumstances, and I thought if someone had helped her, maybe her life would have been different. Maybe she would have lived longer, been happier. I couldn't change her story, but I could change yours." "Or at least try." Sarah turned in his arms to face him fully. "You did more than try, Cole. You saved me. You gave me back my life, and then you made it better than I ever imagined it could be." "We saved each other," Cole corrected. "I was just going through the motions before you, working and existing but not really living. You taught me what it means to have a family, to have a purpose beyond just the next day's work. You made me whole." They kissed then, a kiss full of history and promise, of shared struggles and shared joy. When they pulled apart, Sarah rested her forehead against Cole's. "I love you, Cole Brennan, today and always. I love you too, Sarah, until the stars fall from the sky and beyond." As the years continued to pass, their love story became legend in the area. People spoke of the widow who tried to sell her wedding ring, and the cowboy who bought it and gave it back, and how that single act of kindness had blossomed into a love story for the ages. Young couples would ask them for advice, and Sarah and Cole always gave the same counsel. "Love isn't just a feeling," Cole would say. "It's a choice you make every day, a choice to be patient, to be kind, to put someone else's needs alongside your own. And it's okay if love looks different at different times in your life," Sarah would add. "The love I had at 20 with Thomas was real and true. The love I found at 25 with Cole is equally real and true, just different. Both were gifts, both shaped who I am." They grew old together on the Double R Ranch, watching their children have children, building a legacy that stretched across Kansas and beyond. Cole's reputation as a horseman became legendary, and Sarah's cooking was still talked about decades later by men who'd eaten at her table. When they were both in their 70s, too old for the hard physical work but still sharp in mind, they would sit together on the porch of their house and watch the sunset over the prairie they'd called home for so long. Cole's hand would always find Sarah's, their fingers interlacing with the ease of 50 years of practice. "Any regrets?" Cole asked one evening, the sunset painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Sarah thought about the question seriously, as she always did. She thought about Thomas, gone so long now but never forgotten. About the desperate day she'd tried to sell her wedding ring. About the tall cowboy who'd shown her unexpected kindness and then given her a whole new life. "Not a single one," she said finally. "Every moment, even the hardest ones, led me here. To you, to our family, to this life. How could I regret any of it?" "Good," Cole said, squeezing her hand. "Me neither. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." As the sun finally dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sarah touched the locket at her throat one more time. She'd worn it for over 50 years, both photographs still tucked inside, both loves still honored. It was the perfect symbol of who she was. A woman who'd loved deeply twice, who'd survived loss and found joy again, who'd built a life of meaning and connection from the ruins of her first dreams. The gold wedding band that she'd once tried to sell out of desperation now sat in a place of honor in their home, mounted in a shadow box along with Cole's wedding ring and photographs of their life together. It was a reminder of how far they'd come, of the moment when kindness had changed everything, of the truth that even in the darkest times, hope and love could emerge if you were brave enough to accept them. Cole and Sarah Brennan passed away within months of each other, both in their 80s, surrounded by children and great-grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. They were buried side by side in the Abilene Cemetery, their headstones simple but meaningful. Sarah McKenna Brennan, it read, beloved wife to 2 good men, mother to 5, grandmother to 17, great-grandmother to 23, she taught us that the heart has infinite capacity for love. Cole Michael Brennan. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather. He taught us that one act of kindness can change the world, and beneath both inscriptions, one line they'd chosen together years before: love never fails. Their story lived on long after they were gone, told and retold by their descendants, by the families who still worked the land they'd loved, by anyone who needed to believe that goodness still existed in the world. The story of a widow who tried to sell her wedding ring for food, and the cowboy who bought it and gave it back to her, and the extraordinary love that grew from that single moment of grace. It became more than just their story. It became a reminder that in a hard world, on an unforgiving frontier, kindness mattered. That seeing someone's need and choosing to help, expecting nothing in return, could create ripples that touched generations. That love could come more than once in a lifetime if you were brave enough to open your heart again. And on quiet evenings on the Kansas plains, when the wind blew just right across the prairie grass, old-timers swore you could still feel the presence of Cole and Sarah Brennan, their love enduring beyond death, a testament to the truth that some bonds are stronger than time itself. The Double R Ranch continued to thrive long after its founders were gone, now run by Thomas James Brennan, the son born to Sarah and Cole who'd been named for both the fathers in his life. He kept the tradition of kindness and community that Cole and Sarah had built, treating his workers fairly, helping neighbors in need, making sure that the values his parents had lived by continued to shape the land they'd loved. In the ranch house, in a place of honor above the fireplace, hung a large family portrait painted from a photograph taken on Cole and Sarah's 50th wedding anniversary. They stood surrounded by all their children and many of their grandchildren, Cole's arm around Sarah's waist, both of them smiling with the contentment of a life well lived. And if you looked closely at the portrait, you could see Sarah wearing her silver locket, the one that held both her loves, both her lives, both the chapters of her remarkable story. It was the perfect symbol of a woman who'd learned that the human heart is capable of extraordinary things, of surviving loss and embracing joy, of honoring the past while building a future. The story of Sarah and Cole Brennan reminded everyone who heard it that love is not a finite resource. That choosing to love again after loss isn't a betrayal of the first love, but a tribute to it, proof that the love you experienced taught you how to love well. That kindness matters, that generosity of spirit can change lives. That one person choosing to do good can create ripples of hope that spread far beyond what they could ever imagine. And so the tale endured, passed down through generations, a love story set against the backdrop of the Wild West, but speaking to universal truths about the human condition. About our need for connection, our capacity for resilience, our ability to find hope even in the darkest circumstances. The widow who tried to sell her wedding ring, and the cowboy who bought it and gave it back, and the family they built together and the legacy they left behind, all of it woven together into a story that reminded people of something essential. That we are defined not by what happens to us, but by how we respond to it. That choosing kindness, choosing love, choosing to help someone in need, these are the things that make us human in the best sense of the word. And on the Kansas plains, where the grass still grows tall and the wind still whispers across the prairie, the story of Sarah and Cole continues to inspire, a testament to the enduring power of love, kindness, and the human spirit's remarkable ability to heal and hope and begin again.